All right. It's 2 o'clock, so I want to go ahead and get started.
While people straggle in, I have a couple questions. How many of you have used Selenium IDE in the past? Raise your hands. Great, lots of people. How many people have used Selenium Builder, or it used to be called Sauce Builder? OK, going to be a lot of learning today. How many of you have used Travis CI? A couple people. Cool, great. This is going to be fun. So my name is Jason Carr. I'm a software developer at Sauce Labs. And today I'm going to talk about integrating Selenium Builder, GitHub, and Travis CI, although you can use any CI system, and talk about how to do codeless continuous integration with Selenium. So this is my Twitter handle. A lot of people ask me what it means, Maudie Ormsby. Maudie Ormsby was the homecoming queen in 1936 at Ohio State University. The interesting thing about Maudie Ormsby is that she was a Holstein cow. So I thought that was hilarious. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. There's really nothing there except corn and cattle. So I grabbed that as a Twitter handle, and it was awesome. So let's start by talking about Selenium Builder. Selenium Builder is a record and playback tool for recording Selenium scripts, just like Selenium IDE, except that Selenium Builder supports Selenium 1 and Selenium 2. This is the future for record playback tools. If you want to do record and playback, you should really start switching over to Selenium Builder. Some of the features of it: it records and plays back Selenium 1 and 2. It lets you create, modify, edit steps in a really clean, consistent web-based UI. And what's really nice about this UI is that it's the same for Selenium 1 and 2. The steps are called the same things. And all of the difference between RC and WebDriver is hidden behind the interface. Obviously, you can export these to the language of your choice. Right now, there's like 8 or 9 languages supported. So all the big ones, plus a lot of support for different frameworks. So for example, if you export in Python, you can export it as just pure Python, or you can export it as Python unit test. So really useful stuff there. And probably the biggest features of Selenium Builder is, one, it allows you to convert scripts from Selenium 1 to Selenium 2, and then back to Selenium 1 if you want. So that's a feature of the fact that we've unified the interface. We've created a bridge between the two, and we don't interact directly with Selenium WebDriver, but we interact with this bridge, which allows us to convert scripts back and forth. And then the plugin architecture is a huge feature of Selenium Builder, and it's something I'm going to be talking about a lot today. The plugin architecture allowed us to centralize the code that was important and then modularize all the other code so that we could be better maintaining it and building new features much more easily. Yesterday, we released a brand new version, 2.0.8, and it added support for breakpoints, for loading, saving, and exporting with a brand new UI. Now you can cut and paste steps in your scripts. So if you have some repetitive steps, you don't have to record them over and over again. You can record them once and then move them around by copy and paste. And then probably the coolest part is that now when you're editing a locator, you can switch back to the browser and it'll highlight whatever it finds in the browser. So there's a really great way to see if your locators are working. It's important to note Selenium Builder is coming to the Selenium project. It's being contributed. There's just some final paperwork to be done, and then it's going to be part of the project. So this is going to be the official replacement for Selenium IDE. There's going to be a process of moving over to the new system. And hopefully a lot more tools are going to be coming. So this is a great time to get on board while it's hot. So why would you use Builder? A lot of you have used IDE, so I'm probably preaching to the choir here. But you're going to use Builder when you want to create a quick script, maybe something you're going to throw away. You're going to want to use Builder when you're automating a lot of boilerplate. So this is a great way to get that login page automated, and then you can do your more complex scripts other ways. If you're just getting started with automation, this is a great tool to learn. It exports really clean code, which hasn't always been the case with IDE. So this is a great way to learn some of the features of Selenium by recording scripts and exporting them. And this is the next generation IDE. This is where test automation from a record playback is going. So it's important that we're aware of this tool and that people are beginning the process of switching over to it. But most importantly, you should use Builder because automating is important. And right now, if you don't have automation, maybe you don't have the time to sit down and build page objects. Maybe you don't have the time or the talent at your company to handle a complex test suite. But anybody can use Selenium Builder. It's very, very simple. And that's why this is a great way to get automation started if you don't have it. This is a great way to get people who are not technical on board with automation because it's easy to explain, it's easy to get them started. So you say, OK, I've used record playback tools. I get it. They work. But can I use those for a CI system? That's really what this talk is going to focus on. And the answer is yes, you can. You can build a CI system around Selenium Builder. So let's talk a little bit more about those plugins I mentioned. Builder has a very robust plugin architecture. I'm not going to go into the technical details of how it works because that's not really what this talk is about. Although that would be a great talk, how to write a Selenium Builder plugin. So somebody should grab that and do that next year. The most important thing is that this allows modular features to be added. So if you wanted to add support for your CI system of choice, it's really easy to add a plugin that supports it, and then it's all plug and play. So there's two plugins we're going to look at extensively today. One of them is the GitHub plugin. The other one is the Sauce Labs plugin. And these make it really easy to add a support for GitHub and Sauce Labs when you're recording scripts. So to configure these, this is the only information you need, and then you're off and running. You need your GitHub username and password, and you need your Sauce Labs username and access key. And if you have that, you're good to go. You're going to be able to get started. So the first thing you're going to need to do is record and save a test. So that looks like this. So let's say I recorded a test. In this case, just visiting a page, clicking around, entering some text, and then verifying that the text shows up on the page when I submit it. We're going to look at this test being recorded and run later. So once I've recorded it, I need to save it to GitHub. And that gets added right here in the file menu. So you have the GitHub integration working. You've entered your username and password. It's as simple as clicking Save to GitHub, and this is going to end up getting saved. It opens up a nice little dialog. You name the test. It shows you all your repos, and you can save it wherever you want. So the test format by default does not export in a programming language. When you save to GitHub, it saves it as JSON. And in the JSON are all the different steps of your test. Those steps get run by a node program called Selenium Interpreter. And what Selenium Interpreter does is enables you to run back these JSON tests and do it in CI systems, do it in setups that don't have a full Selenium setup. And the reason for that is that Selenium Interpreter can be configured to work with any grid. So your CI machine doesn't have all the things that you would need to run tests on it. It's going to communicate to other boxes. Well, Selenium Interpreter lets you do that really easily, and you don't have the overhead of having to save your tests in a programming language and then build out the whole tool chain for that programming language. Selenium Interpreter just takes care of it for you. So this is what we're going to use to configure our tests. So how do you run these tests? Obviously, we got here pretty fast. This is where most of the work is going to happen. So the first thing that we're going to use for running our tests is a tool called Travis CI. For those of you not familiar with Travis CI, Travis is a hosted CI solution for open source projects. So Travis links to your GitHub account. You just you log into Travis with GitHub, and it gets access to all your repos so it can see what you have going on. And then the best part about Travis is that it supports a ton of languages, and it's very configurable. So for example, you can run your tests against multiple runtimes. So if you're using Python, you might want to run your tests against Python 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, 3.2, and 3.3. Travis can do all of that, and it'll run their builds in parallel just by configuring it to run on all those different platforms. And it can handle configuration that's different for different runtimes as well. So it's a really powerful tool. And that's just one example of the configurable nature of Travis. So I highly recommend if you have an open project, check out Travis CI. It's really, really useful, and it's what I use for this demo. I did want to say at this point, though, you could do this with Jenkins. You could do this with a lot of the other CI systems that are out there, hosted or your own systems. There's nothing special about what I'm doing here that has to happen on Travis. So the next thing we need to do is we need to write the interpreter config. Now, the interpreter configuration is a JSON file. When we launch Selenium Interpreter, it's going to have one parameter, and that's going to be this configuration file. And this is where we store all the settings we're going to use for our Selenium test run. So the browsers we want to run against, whether we want to use Sauce Labs or not, whether we want to have our tests run all the tests or just some of the tests, where the tests are stored in the repository. That's all going to be stored in this interpreter config. So let's take a quick look at it and see what it looks like. This is the interpreter config. You can see it's just JSON. And in the config is a type, which tells it that this is a config file. And then all the different configurations we're going to need. So in this case, there's two configurations. There's our settings and our scripts. So the settings, we have the driver options, which just tells the interpreter where to get the driver. So in this case, we're going to use Sauce Labs. And then the browser options, which tells it what browsers do we want to use. This is kind of like the desired capabilities that you would use in a Selenium script. And the browser options, in this case, we say we want Firefox, and we want to use Sauce Labs, so we need to give it our Sauce name, Sauce username, and our access key. Now, you might notice I did not put my Sauce username and my Sauce access key there. There's two reasons for this. One is I don't want you all to steal my Sauce Labs account. But the other reason, and the more important reason, is that when you commit this file into your repository, you don't want other people to steal your Sauce Labs username and access key. And so what we do instead is we set these as environmental variables. And Travis CI will have these variables set on the machine that runs the tests. And how to do that will come in the next section. And then a little note at the bottom, scripts, I'm just telling it run everything in the test directory. So this is really simple, and this is all you need to get Selenium Interpreter up and running. So when I launch Selenium Interpreter, I'll pass it this JSON file as a parameter, and it'll load this and parse it and have all the information it needs to run tests. So we also have to configure Travis. Travis CI uses a file in the repository that's .travis.yaml file. If that file is present, and if Travis CI has build enabled for your repository, it's going to use that file to configure the build. And this stores all your project settings. So you tell Travis what language you're using. You tell it any dependencies that need to be installed before the tests are run. You tell it the command that you actually want run for CI. You can give it things like your Sauce credentials or any environmental variables that need to run to be present for your test to run. And then you can also give it teardown steps. So Travis is eminently configurable. Let's take a look at what a Travis config file looks like. So again, this is really simple stuff. This is just a YAML file. At the top, we say we're going to use Node.js because the Selenium Interpreter is a Node.js program. We tell it, before you run my script, do an npm install. So what that is Node Package Manager. And we're saying, hey, install the Selenium Interpreter for me, please. And all the -g does is installs it globally. And then the script, just like I said, we invoke the Selenium Interpreter, and we give it one parameter, which is the config file. And then we have this env section, and this is where things get really cool. In the environment section, I have set some global environment variables, my Sauce username, which is just jcar, and then I passed it a secure token. And that secure token is encrypted, and it is encrypted specifically for the repository that it is in. So this file gets committed into a repository, and that repository will store this secure variable, and it's linked only to that repository. So nobody can come in here and take my username and secure token and run tests on my account on Travis, because Travis will only recognize the validity of this key for the one repository it was generated for. Generating this token is really easy. All you need to do is do a gem install Travis, and it installs a Travis gem that you can use to generate secure keys. So it's a very simple command. You pass it whatever environmental variable you want to encrypt. So there's other services other than Sauce that you might want to encrypt the variables for. And it'll give you this token that you add to the file, and you're good to go. So let's switch back over here. So the other things you need to do to make this work, you will need to link your GitHub account to your Travis account, and you'll need to add that travis.yaml file to the repo that you want to have run on Travis CI. You'll need to generate a new token for every repo, but that's a small price to pay. And then you just go into your Travis account and turn on your builds, and you're good to go. And Travis will automatically start detecting when you push and run your tests on every push. So this is what the flow looks like. We've talked about all these pieces. You record your tests with Selenium Builder. Then you're going to save that test to the GitHub repo using the GitHub plugin. The Sauce plugin is going to automatically, is there in case you want to test your tests on Sauce before you push everything to GitHub and finalize it. You've got Travis CI hooks, which install your dependencies, give it the command for CI to run, and pass in your Sauce credentials. So this is all really pretty basic, pretty simple stuff. And it's crazy delicious. So let's take a look at it all working. So this is the repository that I created. It's public. You can go take a look at it. And you can see we have this example test in the repo already. So now I open up Builder, and I'm recording a new test. So with Builder, you can do all kinds of stuff. You can click on elements. You can type text. And it's recording in the background all the things I'm doing. In case you didn't know, Builder is a Firefox plugin right now. There's hope that it'll extend to other browsers in the future. And you can also record validations, which is what I did there, just to make sure that the text is present. So now I'm going to run this test locally to make sure it works. You can see there I have the option to run it on Sauce if I wanted to. And now I'm saving it to GitHub in the right place in my test folder. So now I'm going to switch back over to GitHub, and you'll see that it was committed right there. And this is kind of what that test looks like. It's just a bunch of different steps that'll be interpreted by the Selenium interpreter. So now I go over to Travis, and it takes a minute. Travis is only checking GitHub every 30, 45 seconds, something like that. So I have to wait for Travis to find the build, but it does eventually, and that build will get fired in a second. You can see right at the top where it set my environmental variables for me, and it cloned my repo. Now it's installing my dependencies. And then it finally invokes the Selenium interpreter. So let's switch over to Sauce. And you can see that the tests are running in Sauce. And the test gets played back, just like I recorded it. And now you have this great Sauce Labs output that you can look at that shows you all the steps and the Selenium responses and whether or not things passed. And going back over to Travis, build passed. So that is it. That is what I have the rest of my time for questions and answers. So questions, yes?
If you wanted to subsequently, after you did the recording, export this as to a specific language binding, how would you do that? Like, if you wanted to export it to Ruby or Python, how would you do that?
All right. So the question is, once you've recorded your test, what if you want to export it to Python or Ruby or Java or some language? How do you do that? So I'm going to live demo. This could all go horribly wrong, but I want to be kind of hands-on here. So let's say we're going to record at saucelabs.com. So let's pretend that our test was clicking around here, and then let's record a verification. Great. So that's our test. The question is, how do I export this? If you go to File, one of your options is Export to GitHub, and there's also this Export option right here. So if you click on those, it gives you a dialog that asks you what format do you want to save this in. So my choices are Java, Ruby, Python, PHP, Node.js, C#, Java, English. In case you're seriously, actually one of the best use cases for this is to have a project manager run through tests with Selenium Builder and then export it to English. And you can hand that to a developer. And it's a description of all the things they did. I'll actually show you what that looks like. So let's see if I can make this bigger. So you can see, start Firefox like a boss, navigate to saucelabs.com, click the element identified by the XPath query, blah, blah, blah. You can see it uses XPath. In Builder, you can change that so that we change the selector strategy. Instead of XPath, we could change it to use an ID or a name or link text. Link text is probably the best if you're trying to do a human readable. I think it's because, yeah, it really is the worst default possible. The question is why is XPath the default? I actually don't know the answer for that. It would be a great suggestion if you wanted to bring it up on the mailing list that maybe something else should be the default. So, okay, so that should answer how you export. Great. Yes.
One of the suboptimal things dealing with Selenium IDE was you always had to go and alter it to add wait statements and stuff like that, explicit waits. How have you dealt with that with Selenium Builder? Because I assume it's not quite as suboptimal.
Yeah, tests are a little bit more robust. As you can see, I managed to run it in sauce with no problems, and it didn't need waits. I also didn't do any AJAX, so that would probably have affected things a little bit. When you export your scripts, though, I'll show you. I'm going to export it in Python because that's what I know. So it's hard to see up here, but there's an implicit wait statement that's included. So there's a lot better boilerplate in Builder, and it just handles those things a lot better. Yes?
You said that it's pretty much as easy with Jenkins. Any qualifiers or are there any major, slightly major tasks involved?
I would go look up the Jenkins plugin. It's unfortunately not installable from the interface, but I'm pretty sure there is a Jenkins plugin. That's going to streamline a lot of this for you. But the major configuration steps for Jenkins is just going to be the same kind of configuration you had to do for Travis. So you're going to save these tests into a repo somewhere. You're going to make your Jenkins build clone that repo. You're going to make it install the dependencies, which is going to be Selenium Interpreter. You're going to have to give it the environmental variables so that it knows. You're going to have to use this. You're going to have to set up the interpreter config so it knows what Selenium grid to use. So if you're using Sauce Labs, it's going to be the same as this. If you're using your internal grid, it's going to be different. And then you're just going to have to do all the setup to invoke the right command and all of that. But it's really pretty straightforward. You're just using that Selenium interpreter to handle all the dirty work for you.
The second line, it says click element when text.
I just broke that. I just broke that a second ago. All right, any other questions? Yes?
Everything you just showed us is, you can find the reference to the cheat notes where that sauce, is that a place to go?
The question was, where can I find the cheat sheets for this? Where you want to go is to seleniumbuilder.com, sebuilder.com. That's going to have a link to all the documentation for you. Anything you want to do with Travis, you're going to want to go to travis-ci.org. And then the sauce stuff is all documented at saucelabs.com. So, yep. Yes?
How do you use JavaScript or something
Like an execute script? Sure, let me just show you. So I'm going to throw this test away. It's the great thing. I don't feel even the slightest bit bad about throwing out a test because it took me 10 seconds to record. So let's record a Selenium 2 test. And I want to do an execute script. So I go here and I add a new step below. Don't quite remember where that is. Let's see. I'm not sure how to do execute script specifically, but this is how you add steps that aren't recorded. So without taking too much time to look at all of these and figure out where execute script is, I'm not 100% sure. But I do know that it is something you can do. I'm just not sure where that is in the interface. I'm sorry. Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
So that list of commands you're showing there, is that configurable, that we could add our own set of methods and commands into those?
I am not sure about that. That's something you could look at the documentation and find out. My understanding is that this list of commands is the common intersection that they've built so far between the Selenium 1 and Selenium 2 APIs, and that these are all the different ways that they've identified for people to manipulate that. So every single one of these commands translates directly into Selenium commands that are going to be run either by the interpreter or the language that you export into. You can probably stop the recording and throw that away. Any other questions? Yes. The question is, are there any known limitations to what can and can't be recorded? The answer is yes. One thing is it's very difficult to abstract out information. For example, if you use different usernames and passwords in different environments, you're going to have to modify that script by hand and add boilerplate to load that configuration. There's no way to do that in the interface. Apparently, execute script is MIA. I don't know what happened there. But there are some commands that just aren't quite there yet. This is still in development. It's still being developed as as the successor to IDE. It's really not expected that everybody's going to move over overnight, but we're trying to make that as easy as possible. So if you notice something that's missing, the Selenium Builder mailing list is a great place to bring that up. And there's people working on this, so they will add it for you. Still have a couple minutes. Any more questions? Yeah, it's sebuilder.com. All the links are available at sebuilder.com. So the mailing list, everything like that is all accessible from there. Over here? Yes?
What's the language option on the
The language options down here. Right now it's English, German, French, Japanese, and Portuguese. So add a localization, please. Yeah, that's a great point. So far this has been translated into several languages. Feel free, please, translate it into the language that you're the most comfortable with. We would love that. Yes?
Do you have a Selenium page object builder? Because the output of this, everything is hard-coded, all the locators are hard-coded. Do you have an alternative? Like, I want to do a page object. So here's an IDE, and you click on things, and helps you build.
The question is there a Selenium page object builder? Unfortunately, the answer is no. There's a lot of reasons for that. Probably the biggest is that that's just a very difficult technical problem to solve. Basically, you're asking someone to write a tool that looks at multiple web pages, identifies all the commonalities, and then abstracts them out for you. I think it could be done. I just think it's really, really hard. So that might be a great project for people to try to get started. I mean, this is a case of if you can leverage the power of the open source community, you can do some pretty cool stuff. So I would really encourage people to get together and talk about that. But I know some people have looked into trying to make that happen, and it's always hit dead ends. And it just might be that our ability to analyze things and find those common elements just isn't there yet. Any other questions? Great questions, by the way.
Would this record and playback work for browsers or like sites that are in different languages?
So the question is, will this work with sites and browsers that are not in English? The answer is yes, it will work fine. Selenium works fine with other languages. The issue is going to be you need to make sure that that the encoding and everything translates out okay. So any languages that have encoding problems are going to probably persist through this as well. So especially if they have accented characters and other things, you're just going to have to double check and make sure that the encoding all works out. But it should. It should work just fine. Yes, sir?
Maybe you covered this, but Selenium Builder is only Firefox?
Right now, it's just the Firefox plugin. The question was, is Selenium Builder only for Firefox? So this is a two-part answer. To answer your question directly, it's just for Firefox. The indirect answer to your question is that this interface that you see is all HTML and JavaScript. It has some hooks in it that hook in directly to Firefox that are on the back end. So the whole point was that we abstracted out all of the common things we could so that writing a Chrome extension would be as easy as writing the Chrome hooks for the interface that already exists. So this is one of the things that we hope gets done as soon as this gets accepted into the project, is that people take on the responsibility of, okay, Selenium has more knowledge of how to integrate with the browser than any other project. Surely we can write some backends for Chrome for this, whether that's integrating with Chrome driver or integrating with Chrome directly. So that's something that we really want to have happen. But right now, you can record this test in Firefox and play it back in a different browser. Yes?
Given that all these locators are hardwired and so forth, do you recommend tests like this for use in a production environment or just for prototyping?
The question was, given that everything in this is hard-coded, is this really a good idea to use this in a production environment, or is this really just for prototyping? Again, two-part answer. The first is, yeah, absolutely, you can use these in production and they will work. The issue is going to be how rapidly you iterate and how quickly you break these tests. Tests are very easy to record. People make a big stink about how every time you change, you have to re-record your tests. The truth is, if you're doing short, granular tests like you really should be, re-recording your tests really isn't that big of a deal because they're very short and very easy to record. Where you get into problems is when you record really big, long, complicated tests that take 10, 12, 15 minutes to run, and then you make a one-line change that breaks it and you have to re-record the whole test. That's a waste. So it kind of depends on the circumstances of your testing environment. If you're recording a lot of tests like I just recorded, then yeah, use them in production because they're really easy to re-record. If you're using really long, complex, 20-minute tests, one, that's probably a bad idea and you should probably fix it, but two, you definitely don't want to use record and playback because you're gonna break your test. That said, if that's your situation, export it to Python or Ruby or something and then make the changes in the code when that happens and you've got the best of both worlds. I have time for one more question.
What's the best way to pass data strings from one script to another in this environment? So if I make a bunch of small tests and I want one to use data from the browser.
Yeah, the question is, how do you pass data from one test to another? Selenium Builder does not have an ability built in for you to do that. That's really outside the scope of the tool. You can export your scripts to a language of your choice and then add some data handling in those tests. That's probably going to be the best way to do it. So it's up to you, whatever your language supports as data transfer is going to be the best way to do it. All right, thank you all very much.